It's another interesting edition of the Market Review where we discuss key developments in the financial and capital market as it affects the economy. Today, we'll be assessing the developments in the Nigerian commercial papers market. And my guest is Mr. Ayodeji, MD, CBO, Optimus by Afrinvest. Nice to have you on the program.
Yeah, good morning and thanks for having me.
Thank you very, very much. To our viewers, before we begin the conversation, let us give you a wrap of some major market stories from last week. In a circular released, the Securities and Exchange Commission stated that it has observed with concern the fraudulent activities of some unregistered investment crowdfunding platforms and advised the investing public against making investments with or through any crowdfunding platform that's not registered with the Commission. Also last week, the International Energy Insurance PLC informed the investing public of the takeover of the company by Norenberger. Norenberger has obtained the approval of the National Insurance Commission to acquire 100% equity holding in the company. The FMDQ exchange announced that it has submitted A to Z Petroleum Products Manufacturing and Marketing Limited's 20 billion naira commercial papers on its platform. Those are all the stories, key stories from last week as it concerns the market. If you're joining us, it's the Market Review, and today we'll be discussing the developments in the Nigerian commercial papers market space. And with me to have this conversation is Mr. Ayodeji, investment analyst, a notable one, and also the MD CBO of Optimus by Afrinvest. So Mr. Ebo, let's first begin with assessing the issuance of CPs so far, what we call commercial papers in 2022. In the first 7 months, we can say that over 270 billion naira worth of commercial papers have been raised by private companies through even the FMDQ exchange. Is that a very positive fraction, and what's your assessment in that regard?
Yeah, so I would say it's been an interesting time in the Nigerian commercial paper market. If we look at the data in the last 3 years based on FMDQ data, the corporates have been able to raise about 5 trillion, which is significant. And if we note, commercial papers are unsecured short-term debt obligations that most companies use to fund their operations because of its nature of short-term. It's not used in expanding or it's not used for capex. Yeah. And so we've seen, and you are right, in the last, as of January, based on the number of listed commercial papers, they were around, I think, 37, and that grew to about 58 as at end of June, and to an outstanding value of about 518 billion. That's really very interesting, and it's that creates a bit of a lot of support for the private sector. You would know in the past we've always been speaking about crowding out effects, and these are just those that are listed. There are a lot of also private commercial papers that we have seen within the last 6 months in the markets. For some of them may not be able to meet in terms of the criteria, the rating for them to be able to list on the FMDQ, but at least the private papers to have also been able to support businesses. And one reason why I would say we're seeing the influx of that is the interest rate environment. There's always a premium over treasury bills. So with what we're seeing in the treasury bills market, with the 364 days still at 7%, that still gives a lot of leeway for a lot of commercial corporates rather to also issue commercial papers. So I would say by and large, the interest rate environment is one of the main incentives that propel a lot of corporates to issue commercial papers.
Yeah, I mean, you rightly said that there are private commercial papers that have also been listed, and we know that the FMDQ, like you've alluded now, over 58 companies, like 518 billion worth, which is really remarkable. But if I were to ask, what, in terms of creating the enabling environment, what can be done more so that those other companies can come on board and list more? I mean, it's an interesting time. You talked about the interest rate environment. What should be done more to encourage more private companies to list commercial papers? I'm particularly happy that the crowding out effect that was complained about several years ago is dwindling. It's now open for the private sector to also be involved.
Okay, thanks. I think the first thing that can enhance this is for the federal government to create an enabling environment. Because once businesses are still expressing a lot of risk, yes, they may even have access to capital, but in terms of turning that capital around and being able to pay back would also be very critical. And also being able to realize the expected revenue from the capital that has been injected is really very important. And for the private commercial papers, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of structuring. Some of those private commercial papers are even securitized just to reduce the risk element in it. They may not pass the normal rating system. So I feel that what the FMDQ can do based on the current CBN rule is that minimum issuance for commercial paper is 100 million. Yes, so the FMDQ may create a market for commercial papers that may not have the right ratings, but have been able to issue CPs in the market, and they've been able to get investors. So over time, investors will be tracking them since maybe number of issuances they've been able to pay back. So they can be another they may not meet up. May not be able to meet up with that rating, and that market I think would also create a lot of opportunities for the private sector.
So some creativity is required again for the FMDQ, even though they've been doing a great work in terms of attracting more CPs. So to encourage these other private players.
Yeah, correct. So it's just creating a class. So they may be high risk, and it will only be to qualified investors that understand the risk, and they may not have as much standard or rating like the one we've seen. So over time, they can now migrate to the standard market.
Yeah, very well. And when you look at the class of companies that have issued a commercial paper so far, you're part of the big players. So you talk about the MTNs, the Dangotes, even in the real estate, the Lekki Home Gardens, and even other major companies. It shows you that a lot is happening, and that various companies are also exploring opportunities to sustain the business amidst the challenging economic environment.
Yes, it's true. When you look at the sectors that are benefiting, the agri sector, especially those in commodities, are really benefiting because their business requires capital, and also, I would say, in quote, less risk. A lot of them just get purchase orders from a lot of the fast-moving consumer goods companies and try to just supply. Also, you would see the real estate sector is also taking advantage of it. But I have a bit of concern around using commercial paper for real estate because of the time to market. When you look at looking at the maturity, which is less than a year, matching it with the duration or gestation period of real estate. Yes, maybe some may claim that they are able to quickly build from scratch and sell within that 9 months, but they need to quickly migrate into issuing bonds than using commercial papers, because we may begin to see a mismatch, and where they are unable to also sell, we're hoping that it's not going to become like a Ponzi scheme where you quickly have to issue another one to pay while you're expecting that you'll be able to sell. So for the real estate, yes, it's good for a start, but for sustainability, there needs to be a shift to longer term instruments. And we've also seen, you mentioned the telecom sector, a lot of the merchant banks are really using the commercial paper markets, and for them, it's straightforward. They're able to raise at a cheaper rate, and they're also able to give short-term loans, give bank overdrafts, or use for trade financing. Yeah, so for them, it's a bit straightforward. And we've seen some investment outfits, banks also taking advantage of that market. So it creates the ability for rather than focus on getting financing from the commercial banks alone. And you know, for the commercial banks, it's always very rigorous, a lot of them in terms of the requirements compared to what you see for CPs.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it also reduces that burden, but we can say it may also reduce, if we begin to see much of that, it will reduce the loan books indirectly from the banks. Because see, for instance, MTN raising about 125 billion in this market, maybe ab initio it would have been an OD or a short-term loan in the banks. So with this size that we're seeing, it would also reduce reduced the impact rather on the loan books of the banks.
So it's about, will we see more traction in CPs issuance in the remainder of the year? Are we going to see something like a 1 trillion level? Because already we are halfway in terms of that amount. We're over 500 billion.
Okay, thanks. So the first thing is we'll see reissuances because when you even check those are listed, maturities are short-term in nature, and we'll have a lot of them mature. And what I would also just chip in is for investors that most times, rather than just continue to roll over, it's always good to stress test. Let the issuer pay, and they can issue new series. Yeah. So for you to be sure that they are not just trying to roll over and create some form of complex structures. We believe that if interest rates remain at this current level, 7% for the 364 days, it still gives significantly ways. You know, when you compare it to years where you have treasury bills at 18%, so at what rates by the time they're adding the 5-6% premium on it, risk premium on it. So we believe that as long as interest rate remain favorable, we'll see more commercial papers, be a lot of confidence. Luckily, maybe to the best of my knowledge, in recent times, I have not seen any of the CPs defaults, and that is creating some confidence. But investors should also be aware that rating is key. For those that list, it's good to look at the rating, look at who is rating them, so that before you invest your money. And we'll continue to emphasize that diversification is also part of investment. Yeah. That you don't go and because one commercial paper is giving you very high interest, you put in all your funds. Yeah. So it's good to also diversify and spread it. And you enjoy some with low interest rate and enjoy some with high interest rates. With that, it will help you to minimize that from the investor's perspective, from the issuer's perspective too. It's just to ensure that they try their best to uphold the confidence that we're seeing in this market, because even if one defaults, it's really going to have that ripple effect on others that are just trying to assess the market. So it's important that they try, and the issuing houses also ensure that everything is put in place so that the confidence and the ethics of the market is upheld.
A lot in terms of the ecosystem, like you rightly said, the Association of Issuing Houses of Nigeria, of course, which your esteemed company is a part of. That's a big word to them. And in terms of the development of the market, the FMDQ exchange and other ecosystem players, and like you rightly said, from the monetary policy axis, the interest rate environment, if it remains at what you've said, 7% for the 343 days, is that right?
Yeah, the 364 days, yes, that's the 1 year treasury bills.
So if it remains at that, then we'll likely see more of traction in terms of commercial papers issuances in the market. But thank you very much, Mr. Ayodeji, for what you've raised and the insights you've brought to the developments in the Nigerian commercial papers market. We'll continue to monitor all the activities from the interest rate environment and the rules of other ecosystem players, and what companies are doing that are raising or issuing the CPs in the market. Thank you once again, Mr. Ayodeji, MD Optimus by Afrinvest, for this very interesting conversation.
Always my pleasure, and thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. And that will be all for this edition of the Market Review Show. If you have questions or suggestions around the developments in the Nigerian commercial papers market, please send them to the email displayed on the screen. Also, you can join our website, www.proshare.co, to read our latest news articles, stories, and reports on activities around the commercial papers market. We are capturing them courtesy of what's happening in the FMDQ exchange and other ecosystem players. You can engage us via social media platforms displayed on the screen. Don't forget that you need to be informed to make the right investment decisions. Thank you for watching, and keep discussing the financial and capital markets because they create wealth and economic opportunities.